To the average person, a home is a place of comfort, but to the world's ultra-elite, it is the ultimate monument to absolute power, status, and infinite capital. From 27-story personal skyscrapers engineered to survive massive earthquakes, to historical royal estates worth billions of dollars, the upper echelon of global real estate operates in a completely different reality. These are not merely houses. They are private fortress states equipped with military-grade security, subterranean infrastructure, and alternative power grids. We are unlocking the gates to the most exclusive addresses on the planet to uncover what it truly costs to own the 10 most expensive properties ever built. Let's begin at the very top of the pyramid, with a property so vast and so layered in history that traditional valuation models barely apply to it. Buckingham Palace sits at the apex of the global real estate hierarchy, with analysts placing its estimated asset value at around $4.9 billion. But this number only tells part of the story. Unlike almost every other property on this list, Buckingham Palace is not privately owned in the conventional sense. It exists within a unique institutional trust structure, held in what is legally described as sovereign right, meaning it belongs to the reigning monarch not as a personal asset, but as an inheritance tied permanently to the crown itself. This distinction matters enormously. It means the palace cannot be sold, mortgaged, or liquidated the way a private megamansion could be. Its value is almost entirely theoretical, a reflection of scarcity, history, and symbolic weight, rather than a number that could ever be realized in an actual transaction. Physically, the numbers are still staggering. The palace contains over 700 rooms, including 19 staterooms used for official functions, along with 52 royal and guest bedrooms, 92 offices, and 78 bathrooms. It functions simultaneously as a family residence, a working government headquarters, and a ceremonial stage for the British state. Beneath its surface lies an operational infrastructure most visitors never see, including its own post office, medical clinic, and even a cinema. The palace employs hundreds of staff members who manage everything from ceremonial protocol to garden maintenance across its 18-acre grounds, which include a helicopter landing area and a lake. What makes Buckingham Palace the undisputed number one on any list of the world's most valuable properties is not luxury in the conventional sense. It is a fusion of unmatched historical prestige, irreplaceable location in the heart of London, and its permanent institutional role as the working seat of monarchy that has existed for over 1,000 years. No amount of private wealth can replicate what centuries of continuous sovereign occupation have built. From institutional monarchy, we move to a completely different model of wealth expression, one built not on inherited tradition, but on the raw display of modern industrial fortune. In the heart of Mumbai, rising 27 stories into the skyline, stands Antilia, the private residence of Indian billionaire Mukesh Ambani, chairman of Reliance Industries, valued at approximately $2 billion. Antilia is widely regarded as the most expensive private residence ever built for a single family. To call it a house is almost misleading. It functions more like a vertical city, a self-contained tower engineered specifically to accommodate the needs, security, and lifestyle of one of Asia's wealthiest families. The scale of the engineering involved is extraordinary. Because the tower needed to be earthquake-resistant in a densely populated urban environment, its structural design incorporates advanced seismic dampening systems capable of withstanding significant tremors, a requirement rarely seen in private residential construction anywhere in the world. Each of its 27 floors has a different ceiling height and design theme, meaning no two levels of the building are structurally identical, a deliberate architectural choice that dramatically increased both the complexity and the cost of construction. Among its most talked-about features is a private snow room, an enclosed chamber engineered to generate artificial snowfall and freezing temperatures inside a building located in one of the hottest climates in the world. The tower also houses multiple swimming pools, a 200-seat home theater, several helipads on its roof, and parking facilities capable of housing more than 160 vehicles across dedicated multi-level car grids. But perhaps the most striking statistic of all is the human infrastructure required to keep the building running. Antilia reportedly requires a full-time staff of around 600 people, covering everything from household management and security to technical maintenance of its extensive mechanical and power systems. This is not simply a home with domestic staff. It is closer to a small corporation dedicated entirely to the operation of one family's living space. Antilia represents a new category of ultra-luxury residence, one where the property itself becomes a demonstration of engineering capability, industrial wealth, and the ability to bend infrastructure that normally serves entire buildings or communities toward the needs of a single household. Leaving the vertical ambition of Mumbai behind, we now travel to the sun-drenched coastline of the French Riviera, a region that has served as a traditional playground of European aristocracy and global wealth for well over a century. Here, unlike Antilia's modern engineering spectacle, value is built on something far harder to manufacture, which is time itself. Villa Leopolda, valued at approximately $750 million, sits on the hills above Villefranche-sur-Mer, overlooking the Mediterranean. Built in the early 20th century for King Leopold II of Belgium, the estate spans roughly 50 acres of manicured gardens, and its provenance alone adds enormous weight to its valuation. This is a property that has hosted royalty, film stars, and heads of state for generations, and that unbroken chain of prestigious ownership functions almost like a form of currency in itself within the ultra-luxury market. Just along the coast sits Villa Les Cedres, valued at around $450 million, one of the largest privately owned estates on the entire French Riviera. Its grounds contain an extraordinary 14-acre botanical garden featuring rare and exotic plant species collected from around the world over more than a century, some of which are considered irreplaceable specimens that could not realistically be recreated today even with unlimited funding. What ties both of these estates together and what drives their extraordinary valuations is a combination of factors that simply cannot be manufactured through modern construction. Historical noble pedigree, mega-scale private botanical landscapes preserved across generations, and the sheer geographic scarcity of large contiguous coastal land in one of the most desirable regions on Earth. In markets like the Riviera, buyers are not purchasing square footage. They are purchasing a piece of continuous European aristocratic history that, once sold or subdivided, can never be reconstructed in its original form. From historical legacy, we move now to properties that push the boundaries of architectural imagination itself, designed less as traditional residences and more as three-dimensional artistic statements. Les Palais-Bulles, or the Bubble Palace, sits above and on the French coast and is valued at approximately $420 million. Designed in the 1970s by architect Annie Lovag, the entire structure abandons straight lines and right angles almost completely in favor of organic, spherical forms that flow into one another like a series of interconnected bubbles carved into the hillside. This radical departure from conventional architecture makes it one of the most instantly recognizable private residences in the world, and its rarity as a livable piece of avant-garde art is precisely what drives such an extraordinary price tag for what is, in terms of raw square footage, a relatively modest property compared to others on this list. In Monaco, meanwhile, vertical scarcity creates its own unique form of value. The Tour Odeon Sky Penthouse, valued at around $330 million, occupies the upper levels of one of the tallest residential towers in the tiny principality. Spanning multiple floors connected internally, the penthouse includes its own private pool suspended high above the Monaco skyline, along with panoramic views across the entire coastline toward Italy. Monaco's extreme land scarcity, combined with its status as a tax-favorable jurisdiction for high-net-worth individuals, means that vertical space itself becomes almost as valuable as horizontal land elsewhere in the world. Both of these properties illustrate a distinct segment of the ultra-luxury market, one where buyers are not simply purchasing shelter or even prestige in traditional sense, but are instead acquiring extreme architectural rarity, whether through radical organic design or through commanding an irreplaceable vertical position within one of the most land-constrained territories on the planet. Crossing the Atlantic now, we arrive in the United States, where the scale of ultra-luxury real estate takes on a distinctly different character, one defined less by centuries of aristocratic history and more by sheer physical size and speculative modern ambition. In Bel Air, Los Angeles, a property known simply as the One carried an initial valuation of around $500 million when it was first brought to market. Spanning roughly 100,000 square feet, the compound was conceived from the outset as arguably the largest private residence ever constructed in the United States. featuring multiple swimming pools, an enormous car museum-style garage capable of housing dozens of vehicles, its own nightclub, bowling alley, and a 4-story glass wine tower. The project scale became so ambitious that it eventually outpaced its own financing, leading to a highly publicized bankruptcy and auction process, a case study in how even in the world of billionaire real estate, extreme scale can outrun even extreme wealth. Out on the eastern end of Long Island, in the exclusive enclave of the Hamptons, sits 4 Fairfield Pond, the estate built by industrialist Ira Rennert and valued at approximately $248 million. At around 110,000 square feet, it remains one of the largest single-family residences ever built in America. What sets 4 Fairfield Pond apart is not simply its size, but its self-sufficiency. The estate contains its own independent power generation infrastructure, effectively allowing property to operate as its own private utility grid, insulated from the vulnerabilities of the regional power network. This kind of infrastructural independence, once reserved almost exclusively for military installations or critical government facilities, has increasingly become a hallmark of how the ultra-wealthy insulate themselves from the systems that govern ordinary life. Together, these 2 American megamansions represent a philosophy of scale as status, where square footage, structural independence, and sheer physical presence become the primary language through which extreme wealth communicates itself. Now we turn to one of the most fascinating and often misunderstood corners of the ultra-luxury property market, the phenomenon of billionaire enclaves, streets and neighborhoods so exclusive that mere proximity to them multiplies value regardless of the individual property itself. Kensington Palace Gardens in London stands as perhaps the most extreme example of this on Earth, often referred to informally as Billionaire's Row. This single street, lined with grand 19th century mansions, houses one of the highest concentrations of ultra-high net worth residents anywhere in the world, including global steel magnates, technology founders, and foreign heads of state. What makes this street so uniquely valuable is not just the historic brick facades visible from the sidewalk, but what lies underneath them. Over the past 2 decades, a distinct trend has emerged among the street's wealthiest owners, involving construction of enormous subterranean extensions beneath existing historic homes. Because strict preservation laws prevent any significant alteration to the visible exterior of these protected buildings, owners have instead excavated downward, sometimes multiple stories deep, to build enormous basement complexes containing private swimming pools, cinemas, gyms, staff quarters, and in some cases even underground car galleries, all completely invisible from street level. This creates a strange and telling duality, an unassuming historic townhouse facade, concealing what is effectively a fortified modern compound buried beneath it. Security on this street operates at a level closer to diplomatic protection than typical residential arrangements, with layered surveillance, reinforced perimeters, and in several cases dedicated private security teams operating around the clock. The mechanics of Billionaire's Row reveal something important about how extreme wealth interacts with historic urban environments. Rather than building new structures to display power, the ultra-elite in cities like London often prefer to inhabit invisibility, hiding almost unimaginable modern infrastructure and security behind facades that, to the outside world, look no different than they did over 100 years ago. Finally, we arrive at the modern era, where a new generation of ultra-wealthy owners has begun rejecting the ornate, historically inspired aesthetic that defines so many of the properties we've already explored, in favor of something starkly different. In Malibu, California, music industry icons Jay-Z and Beyoncé acquired an estate valued at around $200 million, designed by the celebrated Japanese architect Tadao Ando. Unlike the gilded interiors and classical facades common throughout much of this list, the Malibu compound embraces radical architectural minimalism, built primarily from raw poured concrete in a style closely associated with Ando's globally recognized design philosophy. The result is a residence that looks almost more like a piece of monumental sculpture than a traditional mansion, with clean geometric lines, vast uninterrupted concrete surfaces, and a deliberate rejection of decorative excess. This shift matters because it signals a broader change in how the newest generation of billionaires chooses to express wealth through architecture. Where old-world fortunes historically lean on ornamentation, gilded detailing, and visual references to European aristocratic tradition to signal legitimacy and permanence, modern wealth particularly wealth generated through entertainment, technology, and global commerce, increasingly gravitates toward minimalism as its own form of status signaling. The message becomes less about historical lineage and more about exclusivity through restraint, communicating that true power no longer needs to shout through decoration, because it can afford to whisper through architectural purity instead. As we step back and look across all 10 of these extraordinary properties, from the institutional permanence of Buckingham Palace to the concrete minimalism of a modern Malibu compound, a clear pattern emerges. The world's most valuable real estate is never simply about shelter. It is about the ability to bend history, engineering, geography, and even entire architectural movements toward a single purpose, proving that when capital reaches its most extreme form, the home itself becomes the ultimate expression of power.